Hola a todos, ¿cómo están? Mucho gusto, mi nombre es Elizabeth Becerril, espero que estén todos bien y también quiero presentarles a Raúl Montiel.
Hola a todos, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos a esta nueva transmisión.
Así es, Raúl y yo vamos a ser los anfitriones de esta sesión. Como ustedes saben, nos acompañan dos personas de Techstars que nos van a transmitir en estos próximos 30 minutos todo su conocimiento acerca de startups, de lo que está pasando ahorita alrededor de la pandemia, etcétera. Y bueno, quiero darle la gran bienvenida a Jason Seeds y a David Brown. Y esta transmisión va a ser toda en inglés porque nuestros acompañantes van a hablan inglés, pero no se preocupen, si ustedes están siguiendo el chat en vivo de YouTube y también de Facebook Live, van a poder ver que vamos a estar traduciendo las partes más importantes de esta plática al español y posteriormente vamos a traducir todo el video al español para que ustedes puedan disfrutarlo. También hay que recordarles que vamos a poder tener preguntas del público, es decir, esta sesión es para ustedes y queremos que ustedes sean los que les pregunten tanto a David como a Jason todo lo que ustedes quieran saber acerca de Techstars, startups, lo que va a pasar en el mundo. ¿Qué opinas, Raúl?
Pues bastante emocionados por este acompañamiento que vamos a tener el día de hoy con estas personas de Techstars que realmente pues creo que le pueden dar unas lecciones muy interesantes a todos nuestros participantes. Ojalá que estén ya preparando sus preguntas, ojalá que estén con algo en mente interesante para decir. Y pues bueno, ahora sí que vamos a aprovechar lo más que podamos durante esta media hora.
Así es. Bueno, entonces, sin más por el momento, estamos aquí con David Brown y Jason Seeds. David Brown es co-founder y CEO de Techstars y Jason Seeds es Chief Investor Officer de Techstars. Welcome. Thank you for being here, David and Jason. I think sometimes it's really boring when you do an introduction, a formal introduction. So here's an idea. Why don't you introduce each other? Like, Jason, what does David do in Techstars?
Oh, and great. Nice.
What is the job of Jason at Techstars?
Yeah, David will find out what I really think about him, right?
And vice versa.
Yeah. So David, when I think of David, David is what you call a serial entrepreneur, and so he is Techstars is the, I think, fourth business that he built with David Cohen, his co-founder, in all four businesses. So they found a winning formula and stuck with it. And he is our CEO, Chief Executive Officer, but he is also our boss and our manager in chief, and the person who helps our world have structure and direction. And really, his job is to be the ship captain and guide the ship towards the North Star. And so it's a very heavy job. There's a whole lot of people who look to him for leadership every day, and watching him navigate even the COVID situation as an example is really something incredible to be close to. So I've learned a lot from working with him for the last 9 years, actually. So.
Oh, you have to be better with that introduction, David.
Yeah,
it's really a good introduction.
Well, he only gave you the good stuff.
Yeah.
So Jason is also an entrepreneur, and I had the pleasure of meeting Jason, as he says, many years ago. He was the managing director of the Austin Accelerator when I met him, and sort of poured his heart and soul into taking all of the experience that he had gained running his own startup and working with startups to be able to help as many companies as possible be successful, and had many great success stories that I'm sure the companies would have done very well on their own, but I'm also certain that they benefited from Jason's knowledge and wisdom. And I said Austin, but actually you were in the San Antonio program.
San Antonio first, then Austin, yeah.
Today, Jason's our chief investment officer. And so what that means is he sets the investment strategy for everything that we do across Techstars, how we deploy our funds, how we invest in companies, and has a team to help help focus on making those investments more valuable by providing assistance to entrepreneurs, throughout the portfolio to be able to help them continue to be successful. Jason's one of the smartest people I've ever met, never afraid to dive deep on any topic and dive into the details, do the research, and has an insatiable intellectual curiosity from my perspective on, I think, just about anything.
Thank you very much for...
Can I ask Jason a question first, by the way? I was curious how his Spanish was.
Oh, you want a question
What
in Spanish?
percentage of what Ellie and Raul said did you understand?
I understand most, but it wouldn't be good. I would not do well trying to answer questions in Spanish.
Yeah.
I would be too slow. Yeah.
I lived in Miami for 6 years, and I grew up speaking French, which is more similar to Spanish than English. And I felt like, Ellie, I understood about 80%.
Yeah.
What you said,
Oh,
maybe 70.
good.
You speak a little faster.
Yeah.
That's good that I only said good stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we are going to begin with some questions that we have prepared, but por favor todos recuerden que pueden poner sus preguntas en el chat en vivo para después podérselas hacer a David y a Jason. So, Raúl, would you mind beginning with the questions?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Ellie. Well, first, we are here in this virtual edition of Startup Weekend. We would like to know, well, how this idea of making a global Startup Weekend in times of COVID-19 came out.
That's a really good question. I don't know. Do you, Jason? I don't know the original.
I was hoping you had the answer.
Yeah. I think it came from Jose Iglesias, who's in Madrid, who oversees sort of all of the startup weekends worldwide. And obviously our ability to run in-person programs is difficult given coronavirus around the world. And rather than wait until the world emerges, I believe Jose sort of had the idea of what can we do? First of all, to be virtual, but maybe even more importantly, to be virtual in a way that helps the world come up with solutions that to this very, very important problem. And it grew thanks to incredible community leaders around the world to this 70-country, event. Today we're running, this is the Mexican version, and I think there are 40 or 50 other versions in other countries running at the same time. And it's all been put together, obviously, in the last few weeks. So it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, well, I would like to go to the next question because of all this virtual Startup Weekend and the World Startup Weekend idea lies on the community. And now we are like more connected in a global community. I mean, we have had more Techstar Global Startup Weekends and at the same time in different countries, but right now I think it's more because we are all in the same way from our homes. So in this sense of community, what does mean community for you, for Techstars?
I mean, I think the community has all the community leaders that I've met, many in person, around the world over the past 7 years or so since we've been together, all sort of share the same passion for bringing together their community to help entrepreneurs in different ways. And it's an incredible experience of altruistic people that are really not doing it for their own gain, but to help their community and to help each other. I think the global edition allows that to happen on an unprecedented scale. Community leaders at the summit love to see what other communities are doing and bring best practices from one community to another. And this allows us to do that in a way that we've never been able to do it before. And I think it's an opportunity for us all to get to know each other maybe a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. But I don't know if Jason wants to add something to that.
I think well stated. Yeah.
I think we have the first question from our audience. This is from Iris Gallegos. She asks, how do you know if the idea of your project is going well? Oh, that's such a good question.
It is a good question. I think the classic test of product market fit, if you go read the lean startup books and whatever else, would be to at some level you can test the reaction of your customer having an interruption to the access to the service, right? Like, how does it feel to them if the thing is somehow something they can't use? It tells you everything you need to know. And I'll give you a really, really quick story. One of the first Techstars accelerator companies that I invested in was a company called Cloudability. And it was started as, project is an interesting word. It was started as a project to manage, to better keep track of Amazon Web Service spend. And it was a very lightweight little web app. It wasn't meant to be a company. It was a thing that the founder just built and put online. People were using it. He didn't know who was using it and what they were using it for. It broke one day and he got someone threatening to sue him for the service not being available. And this was just a free tool that he just sort of threw up on the web. And that to him said, oh, there's a business here, right? Like that was the indicator to him that there was pull from the market. And so, I think things like that are the things to look for. And then I'll often give founders advice to don't believe survey results, right? The thing you can believe are behaviors of people. And so you should be skeptical of what people tell you they would do, or if you give them a hypothetical or mock-up or whatever, you learn a whole lot more from watching customers actually interact with a real product. And ask the inner dialogue should be, what's happening here? What are they thinking? Because a lot of times a customer can't even articulate what it is that is driving them. And so you have to hone your observational skills to listen for those signals. So one quick story and just a general principle of reading behavior, not asking questions.
Nice. I think we have another question, which is a little bit related maybe. Ramiro Figueroa asked, which was the first project you invest and in what made you take that decision?
Yeah, David, why don't you answer? You don't think of yourself as an investor, so I'm curious.
Yeah. So my first, before we started Techstars, I was a angel investor for a couple of years, and it's a expensive education, angel. You're putting in your own money, and you generally do it wrong at the beginning, and it can be a lot of money. It adds up, and it takes a long time, even if it's a good decision to pay back. So my first angel investment was in a company called Routsmith. And it was a company that helped transportation companies figure out what order to pick up their packages. And the reason I invested is because the two founders, David and I, invested together, and the two founders felt very much like us. They were bootstrappers, so they didn't want to raise much money. They were trying to figure out how to get revenue from customers instead of angel investing, because that would be non-dilutive. They were very, very scrappy, and they were doing everything on a shoestring budget. And it reminded us of us, 20 years earlier. And so we invested, and it was a good payoff. They wound up selling the company 7 or 10 years later with a nice little return.
And that business idea is one that we've invested in a number of times since then, actually. Like, it's funny. It's like one that keeps getting reinvented.
Yeah. What was your first investment, Jason?
I'm just going to go with Cloudability because I already mentioned the story. I don't know if it was exactly the first, but it was among the first, and sort of the first maybe year of me actually putting my money to work. And I learned how to invest inside of Techstars. I bootstrapped my business. And when I joined Techstars, the one thing that I felt like I didn't know very much about is venture capital and how that world works. And I learned that on the job. The thing that I brought to the table was knowing how to build businesses. But I think David's answer is probably the most generalized answer you'll hear. Most investors, whether they admit it or not, they gravitate towards founders that they identify with, which is a reason why some of the biases that exist in investing are so pronounced. So it's something to think about intellectually, but at some level, that's what investors do. It's to understand what the founder's doing. It's easier when they can imagine that they might potentially be doing that same thing themselves, right?
Agree. It's the personality of the founders and how they tackle the project is really, really important.
Okay, well, we go with the next question. Here we have that sometimes projects have a social purpose, not necessarily a business approach. But in the future, the social purpose companies become high valuated. Have you invested in this kind of companies?
Tons and tons, and happily. And we were investing in that. So they go by different names. Sometimes you'll hear the term double bottom line business. I don't know how that translates to Spanish, but meaning sort of two purposes: one of generating profit, and the second purpose of generating some social good. Or we call them impact companies, or now we have a designation in the U.S. where you're a benefit corporation or a B Corp, where you take some of those principles and encode them into the charter for the business. So all of that is a relatively recent phenomena. But when it started to take form and we looked at our portfolio, which is now over 2,000 companies, as it turns out, a very large percentage of Techstars investments happen to be double bottom line businesses. And I think it has something to do with the way that we think about the world and the way that we view entrepreneurs as a vector of societal change. And part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing is that we believe that entrepreneurs help build a better future. And so because that's how we think, we're going to naturally find founders who are incorporating that mandate into the businesses that they're building. So it is a trend. I think it's a fantastic trend. And more investors are not feeling that there's a trade-off between these things for very good reasons. And there doesn't have to be. There's no reason that somehow you are subtracting from the business objective because you're incorporating a broader lens in thinking about the world as a whole. So it is a sort of fashionable trend, but it's one that I love the fact that it exists and that we're participating in it.
Thank you very much for your answer, Jason. Ellie, if you want to make the next question.
Okay, Margarita Castillo asks, how long does it normally take for a startup to start making money?
I don't think there's one answer for that. First of all, making money could mean revenue or could be profits. And so, obviously revenue would come first. Hopefully revenue would come sooner rather than later. I'm a big fan of finding out whether customers, whoever they might be, or the business model might work based on whether some money changes hands, which is an indicator that the thing that you're doing is working and not being played with, and that's revenue. So I would expect revenue within, let's say, a year. Profit can be all over the board. My first startup was profitable in its first year, but I think that's rare. Most startups would take several years before they get to profitability. And it might be that they could get to profitability sooner, but they choose instead to spend investor dollars in order to grow faster at the expense of profitability. And that can be, depending on the circumstance, an excellent trade-off.
So there's not a magic formula for that. I think every founder, every project is different and has to find their own way. But fortunately, we have events such as Startup Weekend that help entrepreneurs a little bit. So that's the next question about why events as a Startup Weekend are so very important, and what would I need to learn this weekend? What should I be learning this weekend?
You know, the way I like to answer that question is I think one of the most magical things about Startup Weekend is for participants is it allows you to feel what it's like to be an entrepreneur and decide whether that's a life that you want. Some people, I believe, right, that entrepreneurship is something that is a gene that you have. You're born with it. You might not discover it right away. You might have a government job for a while, or you might have a lemonade stand when you were 6, or you might be 65 years old before you discover it. Colonel Sanders, that's how old he was when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I think, but I think that the magic of Startup Weekend is it allows you to discover the magic of being an entrepreneur. For a few, like my wife, my wife is a born bureaucrat, right? She is born to follow process, and I love her for it, right? And the world needs people like that. But I think for those of us that sort of are born entrepreneurs, Startup Weekend is an opportunity to ignite that and to find other people that are like us, to find a community of like-minded folks. So I'm older, right? I'm 56 years old, and I became an entrepreneur. I discovered that I wanted to be an entrepreneur in 1985. And I did it in Montreal, Canada, where I was born and raised. And it was, I remember the moment, even though it's so long ago, because I discovered that there was somebody else like me, right? Prior to that, I had felt all alone. I was very different than my parents, than my siblings, than my friends. And we didn't have Startup Weekend back then, but Startup Weekend is an opportunity to bond with like-minded folks and discover the magic of creating businesses.
Thank you, David.
Now, here, Diana asks if there is a specific or a most important quality that will make you take the final decision and think, is this what people really need? Talking about the product market fit.
There's a couple ways it could take the question. I'm interpreting the question to be a question about us making an investment decision to choose to invest in a startup. And there, I think a really interesting and unique thing to understand about Techstars is that we spend significantly more time thinking about and trying to understand the people, the founders who are building the business, than we do the product that they've built. And we may spend some time on the market because obviously that's an important thing to understand, but everything about the product can change. And in the majority of cases, the founders have not discovered product market fit. That's why they're coming to us, is that they've got a good understanding of a problem that exists in the world, and they have a passion for attacking that problem. And they've got some ideas, but they're not sure what's working yet and what's not working, and how do we take the next step, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so most of our diligence process and most of what we're really evaluating is we're evaluating the people. And when we talk about the formula for selecting companies, it's multi-part. It's founders, it's people, team, and then all these other things: market, product, traction. These are much less important to us because those are the things that change. But the founders don't change. When you invest in someone, they're the person that you're working on this with. So it is a whole lot more about the people for us at the stage we invest. Now, a growth stage venture investor, very different evaluation criteria, and because they're writing a different size check, and there's a lot more of a business to evaluate at that stage. But for us, it's all about the people.
And I think that answer links perfectly with the next question, which is, Joshi says, wonder if you guys have witnessed a hardcore pivot of a product that came out great.
I've got one in mind. I'm curious. I'll think of my story, biggest Techstars pivot. You think of yours, and I wonder if it'll be the same.
Okay. It's funny because mine isn't a big company that everybody knows about, but it shows the tenacity of founders. But go ahead, I'll give mine.
Mine's Sphero.
Oh, yours is Sphero. Yeah.
I think the Sphero story is really fascinating. And that company has pivoted many times and changed many times over its trajectory. But when the Sphero founders went through Techstars, their first idea, the product idea, it was like an IoT, connected home, like smart garage door opener or something like this. It was, and they were working on it, and they were trying to figure out what's the business, and so at this point it's all lore, so who knows exactly what words were said when or by who. But in Brad Feld's telling of the story in a office hours in a mentor session with them, he picked up on the fact that it just didn't feel like they were getting traction with the idea, and not traction in the market, but that they weren't bought into it. And he just asked them point blank, like, is this really what you want to be working on? And I'm not sure which of the founders it was, might have been Adam, and the answer was, no, we're just really not that into this idea. And he's like, well, and Brad said, well, what else you got? And they said, we have this idea for a toy robotic remote controlled ball. And Brad said, build the ball. And that was it. That was and so it went from, completely different. Everything about what they're doing is different other than the people at that point. And when we have many of those inside of Techstars, where zero things translated from point A to point B other than the founders over the course of the program.
Jason, for the Mexican audience, would you mind pitching one sentence? What is Sphero?
Well, Sphero, so they've iterated many times since then, but the place where you would have seen Sphero the most is the BB-8 character from Star Wars. That is a Sphero product. And so all of those toys they make, so the robotic ball became that character in Star Wars. And that was via Techstars' relationship with Disney. And now the focus of that business is all around being an educational platform for STEM inside of grade schools in high schools in the U.S. And so very, very different, sort of iterating as they go from point A to point B. So
I'll tell my story quickly. And we have, lots of companies that pivot I think, the estimate is about 25%, right, wind up pivoting their ideas. And it's hard to measure because some of that is completely different and some of that is, a relatively smaller change. But my story that I love is Go Spot Check. And you probably don't know Go Spot Check. They're not a huge company. I mean, they're 300 people or so. They're based in Denver, Colorado. What they do is they have an application that allows you to go into an inspector to go into a store and make sure and take pictures and make sure a product is properly arranged, right? So very much a B2B product. But prior to that, they pivoted to that after Techstars was over. Prior to that, they had a secret shopper application where they could enable an army of secret shoppers to go purchase and rate their experiences, so a B2C product. And prior to that, prior to Techstars, they started life as a company that rented used wedding dresses, or a platform for people to rent out or monetize their wedding dresses. And so all the same company, all the same founders, two major pivots until they landed on the business that they're in today, which is doing very well.
Wow, such great stories. It's weird, like this feeling of trying different things, and sometimes that every time you don't feel that you are succeeding, but at the end, all that learning is worth of something and helps you to cross the line and find the right thing for you, and that's pretty awesome. Continue learning for all the founders that just keep going.
You know, one thing, the expression that I love that I've heard a few people use, you know, these companies that are just amazing and huge and very successful, they will say it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. It's very, very common.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There is no example of a successful business that got there smoothly. With, you know, the ups and downs are extraordinary, and it's easy to romanticize the journey. And when you read about the headline, it seems like it worked out of the gate and never had a problem. And that's just not reality. The reality is dramatic swings for every business, and the only common factor that every successful company has is that they've never died along the way. Like, that's the only thing they have in common. There's no other common factors other than just sticking it out until something good can happen, right?
Thank you. We are just going to wrap up this Ask Me Anything session. We need to go with one-on-one mentorship with some of the teams. But before that, maybe you would like to share an advice for the Latin American entrepreneurs that are going to hear this live stream. Like, what would you say to Latin American founders out there?
I mean, I would say the same.
I would say, go ahead, David.
Oh, I wasn't going to specialize on Latin America because I think entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, right? But what I would say today to anybody going through, especially this version of Startup Weekend, is the world is going to be a different place. The future is going to be very different from the past, and that provides opportunity for entrepreneurs. It is a great opportunity to think about what might be different and provide a solution to fill the gap where that doesn't exist. You know, my experience from previous economic downturns, and I've been through too many before, is that what happens afterwards is job creation comes from startups. Startups hire more new employees than big companies and create job growth for the countries after a recession. So the work that you all are doing in helping come up with the next great ideas is bigger even than providing just the ideas or providing the community. It's also providing jobs and economic recovery for the places that you live in the world at large.
Okay, that's it. Well, thank you very much, Jason, David. Thank you very much for this time for us. Thank you very much for your answers. We hope that all the people who was watching us and the ones who are going to watch this later learn a lot from you and have a lot of enthusiasm for this new era that is going to come after all this that we are living. Thank you very much. And now we are leaving this live conversation to go to the individual mentorship for one of our projects here in the Startup Weekend Online Mexico.
Muchísimas gracias a todos los que se unieron a esta videollamada o este streaming en vivo. Sigan con sus ideas, sigan emprendiendo. Hoy necesitamos emprendedores más que nunca. Nos vemos pronto. Sigan la transmisión.